You guys. But you know how he does his meetings, his brainstorming meetings. They do them live on YouTube. They do live filming, and then they save them all on their YouTube channel.
Who?
So it's his staff.
Oh, yeah.
They sit around and do it all live
Yeah.
and talking at the camera and makes them think. I love that idea, and then they save it.
Even the sessions I've been working with his team.
That's what he was telling me. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
that's cool. Is it fun?
Yeah.
Can you just keep your water bottle down? Just hide it. It's
Really?
sitting in the fridge.
Do I have to?
Yeah.
Over.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just got to have water. So this is good? This is okay?
That's fine.
Pretend it's chai. So this is just like off the cuff. All right, man. It'll be fun. I promise not to pick on you. Bearded guru.
I just
guru.
did this, and there's this thing called what's it called? The evil eye. You do things to prevent people from so if you're looking very good one day, your mother will look at you and say, okay, you're looking too good today. People are going to cast the evil eye on you. So I'm going to do something. So they do a ritual.
Yeah? Oh, I've not heard of this.
No?
No.
So here we do, and in a lot, most of the part of the country, they kind of do that, and then they crack their
knuckles on their head
so
to prevent them from being famous, or what?
No, to prevent them from
the evil eye.
waiting of evil energy.
Oh, interesting.
On the APAC group, aren't you on it?
Like this, Chris.
We've made a group of all the people who attended.
Yeah.
But if you send it to me, then I'll send it.
And then another person says, yeah, looks good. Why does it look good? Difference, right?
Yeah.
So the second one which comes out of jealousy and all that.
Oh.
So it's not really a compliment, but then sort of like sending the negative energy away.
Yeah.
So this is a practice where you say,
Oh my gosh.
and it all go.
It goes away. Okay. So does it help the person not become egocentric? Ah. Cracking the knuckles on the temples. You guys here are just, you cease to amaze. Good sound check. That was a good sound check. Okay.
Okay. Tell me when you're ready.
Wait, I'm not ready. I gotta find my.
What?
I'm going to type a message and put it.
Go ahead. Put a message in the group. Okay. Are we ready?
I gotta check my Facebook.
You want to check your Facebook?
Yeah.
What?
See how many followers I have right now.
Oh.
Ready when you are, boss.
You say hi to the camera.
Hi, camera. Nice to see you this morning. What about the bugs? I forgot what I was going to say. Never mind.
What's it going to be about?
When are we ready? Muka?
In order.
Are you? Okay. Right, Chris.
We're live.
I believe we are live already.
Where do we look? Does
So,
it matter? Oh, I have that one.
and I have that one.
Oh boy. Okay.
Right. So,
Good morning, Vishwas.
good day to everybody listening or watching at this point in time. Got a moment to catch Chris in his travels here in India. And I've known Chris for over 20 years now. And I've seen different phases of his life. I know some of his story, not all of it. But today is a day when I'm going to ask Chris some questions. As an introduction, Chris is a doctorate in education. Let me get that right because it was a new one for me. He is an educational doctorate in curriculum and instruction. Is that right, Chris?
That is right.
What does that mean?
It's not a PhD. PhDs have some different requirements. An educational doctorate just focuses on educational topics. And my focus was on how we design curriculum and how we instruct in different educational settings. And then I particularly chose adventure education and how we train facilitators, adventure facilitators. That was my main kind of, it trickles down into something small that you look at, and that's what I did.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
How long has that journey been?
Well, my journey was a little slower than others. I took about 6 years to get it done, but I spent a lot of time just playing and extra reading and diving into more things that I was interested in. And I lived in a beautiful place, Flagstaff, Arizona. So we had a lot of time to play and explore. And then when it came down to it, then the research part was pretty focused for about a year, just collecting research and writing about it. Yeah.
So this is what I've noticed about a lot of people in the field, by and large outside this country, that you have an interesting combination of a play quotient, an adventure quotient, an academic quotient. I don't know. I'm just making this up, right,
Mhm.
as I go along, because most of what I see here is if you're playing and if you're an adventure, then a book puts you to sleep. And I've been over all these years trying to tell people, look, if you don't read, if you don't build your knowledge base, you will be limited in how you see what we do when we use this methodology, experiential methodology, in adventure, the outdoors, in the classroom, and so on.
Yeah.
So I think this is just a call out to people that you might be able to run an activity and you might be able to process it, but it'll never be good enough till you get a sense of how much more there is out there,
Right.
in the research and the stuff that people are putting out there.
Yeah. And I didn't start diving into theoretical stuff till much later in my career, just because it was, to me, the doing and the playing was more interesting to me than reading. But now it's more of that connection of,
But didn't you start there?
I started pretty
So
much.
here's my, I
Yeah.
think I'm going to go to
Question.
where I really
Sure.
want to go.
Okay.
A lot of us now have seen you run the workshops. We've seen you play. I know that people who have attended it came out, I'm going to use the word zonked, because they said, my God, I didn't know this was possible. And it's just the way you do your stuff. But you didn't arrive there by accident. I believe there was something very intentional in what you put into it. You were very diligent about it. You educated yourself around that methodology. And the leaning towards this field, um, I'm assuming, began very early. So the question is, we want to know, Chris, the man. So what's your story? And
The
begin as
story.
far back as you can, if you will. And you know, the foundation of this methodology is you have the freedom to refuse.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Of
So
course.
I'm just going to ask you this blanket question. So it kind of covers everything.
Okay.
But you can choose which pieces you want to share. And
So
the
I could
question is, who
say
is this person
yeah. Okay.
who has built this ability over so many years of whatever it is that you did? And I think what I'm asking is, what is it you did, and from your early years, to get to where you are today?
I think looking back, it's there. Part of it was, for whatever reason, I was not an inside person. From a very young age, I was always outside. And I remember just exploring. I was very curious about outside. I never, and this was growing up in the 60s and 70s, where we had 3 television channels. So it wasn't being inside watching television. So I'm sure it was my mother's get out of the house, don't stay in the house, that got me outside. But then I was always curious. So I think the innate curiosity is, so I don't know if we're born with that, or if others, adults around us, encourage that. My mother was a teacher, so she probably prompted me to do things and think about things. And I never was really afraid of things that I remember.
What kind of crazy things did you do when you were little
Well,
that you'd think twice about today?
and this was before I was at the age of 9. So I would go into buildings that were being newly constructed, and I would just go inside and climb around into these buildings, and my mother would be frantically looking for me. I would play in the mud. I would come home all full of mud for whatever reason. And then I remember those, what did you do? Why are we all muddy? Because at the time, we had to take our laundry to somewhere. We didn't have laundry in the house. So it was, now we got to wash the clothes again. So there was this, but I still kept going. There was a hill on the side of our block that I remember it being very steep. And I had a tricycle. I have a picture of me as a wee toddler on the tricycle, but I would pull my feet off the pedals and go down the hill and jump the curb into the street. I mean, I didn't know about cars or things like that. And I don't remember my mother ever stopping me. And the end of that story, when I went back to our old neighborhood and looked at the hill, it wasn't even really a hill. It was just maybe a little bit of an incline. But when you're small, things are bigger.
Bigger.
Yeah. And then I hung around with people when I got a little, 7, 8 years old, that they were doing things that were probably not legal. And I was around. So I was in a city that we were doing mischievous things, so adventurous. And when I was 9, we moved outside of the city to more of the country. And then that changed my perspective of things and nature and being far away from stuff. You couldn't get things right away. So you had to be more creative in what you did and who you played with. And so that it's always been there. So that creative spirit, I think, is what I've lived on for so long. It's just creating things, making things up, doing things differently, not the same. And that carried on into growing up as an athlete and just never coming home and always being out and meeting new people and new ideas. And I never was really part of a group in high school. I was kind of friends with everybody. It's just more interesting to me. And then,
Did you struggle with academics?
yeah, in high school, I graduated high school with a C average because I was tracked as an athlete. So I wasn't forced to take difficult classes. And what kid's not going to, give me a difficult class? I wasn't going to jump in and say, give me something harder. And I was just lazy. But I was a 3-season sport athletic person, and then always busy. And then in the summers, my mother would send me to camp. So summer camp is where that attachment to nature and working with young people started. So that was my first experience. And this was 1979, 1980, where I was teaching children. And I had
You were already teaching children?
at summer camp.
Okay.
So summer camp
How old were you then?
so 17 and 18,
Okay.
where my probably even when you go through the training, it takes about 4 years. So you're in leadership training, and then you're a junior counselor, then you're a counselor. So you're, even as a probably 15 and 16, I was teaching little classes to campers. So archery and swimming and sailing and boating. So they always had the staff that would teach. And that's where I realized this was kind of cool, working with kids and seeing them grow and learn. And I was the only one at the time that I was, when I was in camp, I learned how to dive, springboard diving.
Mm-hmm.
So 1 meter diving board.
Mm-hmm.
I took the class because I thought the counselor was really cool who taught it. And then, so I did that every summer, and I learned how to dive and got okay. And then when I started high school, I was on the diving team. So when I was at summer camp, I was the only one who knew how to dive. So then they made me teach diving. And to see the young people get over those fears and to do something for the first time, and how cool that was and how proud they were to that, I think that was one of those catalysts of, ooh, I could really help people get past fear, and then it turned into backpacking and going out in the woods at summer camp, and then seeing how that, and I didn't, at the time, adventure education was not in the Midwest. We didn't have any exposure to that idea. So I knew about outward bound. So my dream was to be an outward bound instructor and go out in the woods.
So it sounds like your mother let you, even created a setting in which you could do the kind of things you do today.
Oh yeah. My mother was hands off.
Was there ever a
Practitioner.
moment when she felt that you had crossed the line?
Yes. And here's what she would say when I've crossed the line. Just wait until you have kids. And that sunk the fear, and I've never had kids.
So is that your?
So I think I'm blaming it on her, that I was so fearful to have children because of the way things that I did, that that's why I never wanted to have kids.
Mm.
So yeah, and it wasn't often.
Any description of an incident in which she said that?
I only remember
What kind of things did she say it for?
I only remember silly things. In my mind, they were silly, but leaving the cupboard open.
Okay.
Not cleaning my dishes before I put them in the sink. What else? Putting an empty container back into the refrigerator.
Nothing about the madness in the outdoors?
No,
No.
she never really knew what I did.
Knew.
Yeah.
Right.
And our neighborhood was good, fun kids, and it wasn't it wasn't highly supervised. If I didn't come home on time, that was a problem.
So she was busy enough not to get curious about the stuff you were
she
doing.
was a teacher, and she
Right.
would come home, and that would be the end of the day. She would read her books and go to bed. That was pretty much it. I fed she had great food in the house. It wasn't junk food, other than we had a lot of canned food. Canned food, and what do they call those? TV dinners that you put in the oven. So you take the cover off, and there's some chicken in there and potatoes and vegetables,
ready to eat.
and you put those in the oven.
Right.
Yeah, TV dinners. So I grew up on Chef Boyardee, Campbell's soup, and TV dinners. Yeah, she did not have any energy to cook. So I learned how to cook. I cooked other things, but usually easy to fix stuff. So she wasn't really worried about me. We did a lot of great things together until I was in high school. Then I was always in sports. And
So when did you leave home, and where did you go?
When I graduated, I wanted to go right to Outward Bound. My grandfather talked me into going to a 2-year college. And when I visited, I saw that they had soccer, and I had just started playing. So soccer in football, soccer in that time was end of the 70s. We were just clubs. We didn't have a lot of, we weren't taught about soccer. Then my high school started a club when I was a junior and a senior. So then I just started, and I was the crazy person who they put into the goal. So I became a goalie. And then in college, that college was actually looking for, their goalie had went off to a larger college, 4-year college. And then I got to step in and be a goalie for a couple of years in the state league. So our 2-year colleges have a league in Wisconsin. So I got to be on a traveling team and for a school, and that was fun. So I went to play soccer, and then school was fine. The teachers were great, and that just kept me in. And then I stayed in to be a physical education teacher. So I went to another school to get my degree teaching gym or physical education so I could be outside more. So then my focus was, what can I do? What degree can I do or complete that would keep me outside as much as possible? And that's physical education was the one. And when I graduated, I wanted to do one more year as a summer camp counselor. And the only Colorado camp that was at the job fair in Wisconsin, I interviewed with them and they hired me to go for that summer. And then that's where I found out about AEE had a jobs clearinghouse. I don't know if you got it over here, but it was the stapled paper. And it was a little booklet of all the jobs. So they would mail that out once a month to members. And
Which year was this?
oh, so this would have been the summer of 1989. Summer of 1989. So that's when that paper copy was circulating. And that's where all those jobs working with kids in the woods were. That's the only place that had those kinds of jobs listed. And back then we didn't have easy ways to find jobs. There wasn't the internet. There wasn't, you had to, I don't know how you even found out about AEE because there was no, it's not on television or it's not, we didn't have it anywhere. It was all on the East Coast for the most part. It was very popular there. But then I interviewed for a job on my way back to Wisconsin. I interviewed for a job in Kansas and then got to Wisconsin and they called me up and I started with them in January 1990, working with kids in the outdoors.
So so your adventure life began in that sense with people, with groups in 1990, right?
Yeah.
So before I ask the next question, I'm just going to tell the audience, if there's anybody listening right now, that if you have questions about Chris the Man, please throw them up and we'll look at them. And if you get them in time, then we're going to ask him and embarrass him a little if we can. So here's my question. We've all, we in this methodology, there's this place that I'm going to call the edge. And a lot of our work is spent in designing stuff that brings people to the edge, because that's when we begin to look at where I was, where I could be, and do I want to do this to move towards that world of possibility.
Yeah.
So one way of looking at it is on the edge of a big rappel. Right? Have you had? I'm sure you've had a lot of these on the edge moments in your own life, and we think that often it's just because we're in the field of gaming and play and adventure in the outdoors that it might be something seriously outdoorsy, but it may not. I'm going to assume you've had a lot of these on the edge experiences. Share with us something.
On the edge.
And
working with others, not necessarily my edge.
Your edge.
My edge. Interesting. Well, I'll probably think of more tomorrow, but my edge, I think, exploring the different tools in this field that we utilize to help others, right? So for example, I had some amazing mentors, early on. So luckily, I worked with some people who had gone through some of their edges, and they're helping me. And I
Could you
would
name some? You-
one of my friends, my good friend Brian Brolin. So Brian Brolin is an amazing educator, has been, and he was one of my teachers. Carl Ronke for sure. Carl, not personally, but through his writings. My first book in
I second that.
1990 on the shelf was Silver Bullets.
Mhm.
And when I started reading the way Carl wrote, that was my it was one of those, this is what I want to do. This is exactly the way I want to feel and be. I didn't think I was going to be a writer, but the way that he presented the activities, and half the stuff I didn't even understand, because the way he presents it,
Yeah.
he puts a lot of fluff in there because he liked doing that. That was for him.
Yeah, but it's great for a laugh, because hidden in that humor
Yeah,
is so much more, because I've read some of his stuff again and again,
yeah,
and I hear what you're saying, that there's more to it than just those words,
right.
the fluff, as you call
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
And that was Carl, and I never even attempted to go in that direction. So my writing is very long-winded, but that's my process.
Mhm,
And there might be a little bit of humor in there, but not like he did. So so he was one. Early on, who was another? I would have to think a little bit more of who was another. But one of these main things that sticks out for me is I was exploring the tools that I have in my personally, and I was using an angry intonation at times to share things about what was happening with the young people that I was working with. And I remember this instance one time, two of them were fighting over a walking stick. And then I said, please let me have that. We're going to huddle up. Huddles were our way of standing around and talking about things. And I threw the stick in the middle. I'm like, you two are fighting about a stick. Tell me why that's important, that you need to be. So I was doing this angry persona,
Mhm.
and then this was happening probably a little bit more than I needed to. So Brian at one point in time pulled me over and said, listen, I get what you're doing, but you're overusing the tool to be effective.
Mm.
So just in that instance, then as I move forward, it's looking at the tools that I have, and if they're overused.
So let me just a question.
Yeah.
So at that point in time, were you aware that you were using it as a tool?
I was doing it on purpose, because I'm
Right.
not innately an angry person.
Right. But did you? So I'm trying to separate two things. One is the feeling.
Mhm.
The other is the act,
Mhm.
conscious act.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can use words that actually triggers anger.
Sure.
So instead of going from anger to words, sometimes I know that I've gone from words to anger, and then I stop myself and I say, what am I angry about? I didn't start it for that.
Right.
And so what was it for you?
Well, the thing about the tool for me was I wasn't angry.
Okay.
I was using it
Mhm.
to and then I expressed my communication was being angry, so that I would hopefully make a point
Mhm.
to these young people, and I thought they'd pay attention to anger.
Because
Oh, he's really angry.
Right.
We better listen to him.
Right.
Which may or may not have worked. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the stick went away, and then we let him think about it, and that's it. But then Brian says, don't overuse it. It's a good tool, but if you overuse it, it's not going to be effective.
Would
They're
you
gonna
call
start
that
ignoring.
an intellectual tool or an emotional tool? I'm just trying to separate. When I say on
Yeah.
the edge,
Emotional.
emotional.
Mhm.
Okay.
Emotional tool, because I am creating a sense of, if someone is angry, then there is probably a sense of fear at the other end. And I didn't think through it at the time, but when you look back, what does anger elicit? And it's usually either fear or some sort of a negative emotion.
Yeah.
But I just thought it, because when my I had people in my life that when they were angry, not necessarily my mother, other adult, in a sense, people who raised me, when they were angry, I listened. So I was using a tool that I was used
Worked for
to
you. Yeah.
because I wanted to make sure I pleased these people because they were my, they were my upbringers or raiser. I don't know what you'd call them.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't my immediate. They were family, but not my biological family in the sense. So I thought it would work.
Adopted family.
Yeah, my uncles, my aunts and uncles, my grandpa. They were close, but not every day, sort of a thing. So when they would get angry, then I would listen and I would change my behavior.
Did it work?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Okay. So
For me, did it work on
it-
me?
Yeah.
Well, it worked on me because I wanted to please.
Hmm.
So I wanted to make sure it didn't make me get mad at them. It made me focus on what I should do better.
And what have you discovered about that?
Um,
What would better?
a
sound-
tool. It's a
Again,
tool
Yeah.
used by certain people that I respect and do not want to alienate to be able to change my behavior. So it was a negative behavior prompt, something like that. In behavioral psychology, there's a word for that. It's negative influence or something like that. I don't know exactly what it is. But people who would get angry at me that I don't really care about, I didn't pay any attention.
Hmm.
I didn't care what they thought, but I did care what my uncle thought. I did care what my aunt thought. I did care what my grandpa thought. So if they would get angry, I would change my behavior. So I just thought it would work on the kids, but I don't have any proof that it did.
But it didn't work for you.
That tool?
On that day.
Not overuse.
So that was the edge for you in that context.
Edge and
right?
learning about
Yeah.
tools.
And something you remember and you pay attention to. I'm
Yes.
guessing over the years.
So that edge it's like experiential education where you experience something and someone tells you you're at the edge. You could overuse it and go over the edge, or you could come back a little bit and use it in a better way. So I think edge work is about recognizing that to change or keep the same, keeping the same might push you over the edge and to more of the unproductive behavior, or step back from the edge and notice how that edge work is for you. Oh, I'm close to this. I need to step back.
I like
So,
that. I like
so
that.
his Brian telling me, think about it. If you save it for when you really need it.
So
and then
being able to go to the edge, but know that you still have the ability to pull back whenever you want, not because of something else.
that's how I interpret edge work.
And the freedom to be able and feel the freedom to be able to do that, to make that choice.
Yeah. And knowing you have a choice, right?
Knowing you have it.
Edge work is getting to that
Yeah.
point and knowing you have a choice, realizing you have a choice. And we did that a lot with children. And many of them at their age never knew they had a choice. It was always anger or fear or refusal or quitting, or those are the only choices that they ever
Conformity.
had. And that was our job, is to help them look at other behaviors and other choices. And we would take them out in the woods and do that, and bring up all this stuff would come up. And that was amazing work. I just thought it was so cool. But then how do you prove it's important? Then you get to hold that whole road, right? So
Right.
tools are just.
Give me an example
exploring.
of an intellectual edge, something that you came across that was so simple but so powerful that it kind of shook.
Intellectual edge. Metaphors.
Okay. Which do you remember metaphor somebody presented that kind of
Well,
did something?
at an early age, I was exposed to Stephen Bacon's The Use of Metaphors in the Outward Bound Experience. I think that was the name of it, The Use of Metaphors. And it seems interesting because it's still, your students have a buzz about metaphors. And I've had some interesting conversation about metaphors. So I was trying to learn metaphors for the longest time, trying to use them. and trying to, so intellectually, I was wrestling with having to use metaphors.
I think that's an interesting. I've met a lot of people who recognize the power, but bringing it in the way you think can be really hard. And then we make it as though I need to create a metaphor, and then there's stress around that.
Right. And it's not that, what did you just say? You said knowing the power of metaphors. I didn't know I couldn't, no one taught me. I read Stephen's book about metaphors. And I'm like, okay, I get the hiking is, the mountain is, the backpack is, he used archetypes. So the archetypes as metaphors. So those mythological archetypes is how he wove it into the outdoors, and the struggle and the overcoming struggle. And
the hero's journey almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was trying to be intellectual. I was trying to push myself to understand how to use them. And then I found most of the time I was using analogies. So this is like, or metaphor is, analogy is like. So then I would wrestle with this intellectual.
Okay, since you mentioned these two things, analogy and metaphor, I was wondering if you could separate those two.
Yeah. So the one I use, if somebody is asking me, and I don't know enough about metaphors to teach anybody a metaphor,
Right.
but many people will know the activity, the spider web.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would always say, life is like a spider web. Thinking I was using a metaphor. But when you look into it, that's an analogy. It's web is like a web. It's like life, right? But you could easily picture the idea of life is a web. And then people can explore the is. So life is a web. What is your web? Then I thought, I think analogies are easier to decode.
Right.
Because life is like a web. What's your web? So I was this intellectual pounding myself trying to use metaphors. But recently, and this is the edge work, I think, intellectually, that a lot of us face these models in deep. You share a lot of models with your students.
I do.
And how intellectually, how many models can we actually wrestle with and understand at a time is the question. So metaphors, to me, I don't teach metaphors because I don't know how to teach metaphors to facilitators. I say use analogies, use an example, and then your examples are, it's metaphors, analogies, and what's the name for examples? I can't remember. So there's those three that you can work with to help people understand things. But now I'm saying, there is a very good friend of ours who loves using metaphors. And I asked her, I'm going to give you maybe a little hint. We don't have to put her on the stage. I asked her, do you know if metaphors are working for your participants? Have you ever checked? Do you ask them, does this metaphor help you to see? And why wouldn't an analogy work? Can't we just use an analogy? It's easier for me to teach people an analogy than it is a metaphor. So we had a little conversation around that. So the edge work is how much edge work can someone actually do intellectually at a time? What do you work on? What do you think about? I am at the stage where the what, so what, now what model
works.
I mean, it works across the board. And edge work in that model, I believe, is less complicated than the edge work at other models. So do you need those other models? I don't know. I'm still wrestling with that. Now, I would say the programs that we work on, the things I like to see, energizers, discovery, energizer programs, discovery programs, skill development programs. Those are the three I mainly focus on. But then there's intervention programs. I believe people who have more tools can help people with interventions and true behavior change. But most of the work that I've ever done are in those first three: energizer, discovery, skill development. And how many models do we really need to help people understand how to look at their behavior, change it if they want, or keep it if they want? So I've come from the edge back down to where I started, which is interesting for me.
And somewhere in that, I think, is that the whole idea of less is more, right?
Mm-hmm.
Simplicity.
Isn't that Occam's razor?
Yeah.
Is that right? I'm looking for a backstage producer crew. Occam's razor.
Do we have any
It-
questions, by the way?
Oh my gosh! So Occam, the
Yeah.
simplest solution is often the best.
Yeah.
And so edge work, I've been to that edge of, man, I'm just not smart enough. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Was the pressure in my head. So I stepped away from the edge saying, I'm not doing good work. Where was I doing good work? And I felt what really got more conversations and were easier for me to formulate questions and ask people things. And those were good conversations. And so I went back there. It's like timeline therapy. Go back to where it was good for you and do that again and see where then that takes you.
Couple of thoughts on that. One is, I wonder if it's possible to get to that simplicity too early in one's immersion in anything. That I think it's a journey that takes us uh, to to complication before we can really ask that question and come back and say, okay, is there a simpler way of
Yeah.
saying this and doing this?
For me,
For
for
you.
me, right? Others get it. Others
Okay.
will get models that they use.
That's because you came to it and they understand it.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they will arrive at it by themselves
Okay.
unless they do the journey.
Yeah. Agreed.
Right?
Agreed.
One thought.
Agreed.
And I think what you're talking about over the sessions that I've been watching the past 10 days, I think that's what is playing itself out.
Mhm.
And I find that I'm going to use a word that probably doesn't exist, but there's a continuousness. It's not continuity; it's
Okay.
continuousness, which
I like
means that you start with something, that you get them to do something, and then you start a conversation, and your so what is really expansive in ways that I think a lot of people are saying, "Oh my, you mean I could actually facilitate on the run?" And while people are still partially or wholly engaged in the activity, instead of keeping it till the end. And I found you doing that with children, with teachers, with participants in at the workshops. I think that edge work that you've been doing intellectually has, for me, has really come alive in how you present. Uh, for example, the idea of leadership with those kids.
Yeah.
And with teachers it was something else, and at the workshops it was something else. But that on the edge stuff, so I know I have a lot to learn. And when I watch you doing that, I'm saying, wow. I did my journey, and I came back to, if we don't do the so what piece while it's alive, the now what piece doesn't emerge. It emerges intellectually, but it's not the edge. And I'm beginning to think that the so what is really the edge, because what's okay,
Mhm.
it's immediate, it's in the moment, but the so what is really asking people to go into different places of their memory and their emotion and say, okay, what did it do for you? So what happened when?
Yeah.
uh, I just love that piece. So what we're going to do now is take a pause, and there are questions. So, while you take a drink of water, question for Chris. How do you figure out if you are overusing the tools to deal with disagreements amongst participants? So, your answers are going to have to be short, sharp, and I think Karthik calls it 22. So, if it's 20 words, your answer is 2.
Yeah. How do you? I've had a lot of those questions in the last 2 weeks. So read that again and see if I can come up with a short answer.
Okay. How do you figure out if you are overusing the tools to deal with disagreements amongst participants? So I'm assuming that the tool is recognizable and usable, but overuse is
Overusing the tool, not tools.
Overusing the tools to deal with.
Tools. Overusing the tools. Okay, my short answer is if you have to, if you're using a tool, which most likely will be accompanied by questions that you're going to ask people in conflict, right?
Yeah.
People in conflict, you're going to ask them questions. If you are asking, I'm gonna put this out there, I think it'd be fun to explore. If you're asking more than 2 questions about the situation, you're overusing the tool.
Nice.
I'm gonna throw it out there because I think one question should suffice to explore and have a conversation about the conflict. And a follow-up question might be necessary to
clarify.
Then how are we going to move forward? That would always be my second question.
Okay. That was sharp.
I think I'm going to stick with that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's a question I often come across. How do you deal with? I know you're going to say.
How do you? I have a whole list of how do you things that I would like
That's
to
your next
write
book.
out. Something that we'll put out there just to get started, because how do you is, it's 40 years of my life of, I eventually found out how to do something, but okay, what do you got?
How do you deal with arrogance or apathetic participants, especially when the goal or outcome desired is team bonding?
Bonding itself.
I know, I said bond. It's
Team
bonding.
bonding. How do you deal with arrogance and
Apathy.
apathy? Okay, my short answer is, and this is honed over time, 100%, because you have to have a lot of good tools as in activities to choose from to be able to create engaging programs. So engaging programs will invite the apathetic into the group. Engaging fun programs will slow down the arrogant, because they won't have much to say about an engaging fun program. So
could the arrogance and the apathy also be in the context of engagement itself, so that they're almost choosing not to engage,
right?
Because then they're arrogant. What's being referred to as arrogance or apathy then has a place for expression. Otherwise, it doesn't.
Correct.
So what I'm hearing you say is, can you do something that engages them?
Yes. So, for example, we're going to use and then the last piece of that. So it's engaging fun programs, because there are some people we know and who we love that love to focus on the deep dive, exploring metaphor kinds of programs. But it may, for the apathetic and the arrogant, The arrogant may challenge your knowledge. The apathy might not buy into the cognitive engagement if it's too long. So you have to find that way of having it fun and engaging on the onset to interest the two. So the one won't challenge you necessarily. You're not spouting knowledge or trying to dig too deep. You're inviting them to participate and have fun. Then you can take it to another level of engagement where you can have conversations versus a clash with the arrogant. You can have the fun and the laughter from the ones who stay back, but you're teaching to the people who want to learn.
Right.
Right?
What if I don't want to learn?
Then
How would
that's
you? What's your?
it's not my
Okay.
it's not my choice.
So
So my choice is to present a program that will engage the most amount of people. And as long as the arrogant and the apathetic are not disrupting the learning process of others. So that's my agreement that I make ahead of time. This is what I ask you.
got it.
You don't have to like it. You don't have to engage. You have a choice. You have to stay here because it's part of your responsibility to stay with the group. If you have a lot to say, I encourage you to just listen for a while and then we'll be able to talk. But I'm asking you not to disrupt the engagement, the learning engagement of others. You don't have to learn anything. It's okay. So I have a human conversation of, would you
So they
do
have the
this one?
freedom to engage or not, participate or not, sit out if they want.
Yes.
And that's probably a good thing at that point in time for them.
Yeah.
And for the rest of the group.
And I honestly don't give them the option to sit out.
Okay.
They can check out, but I would like them to be part of the group. So going to sit down, then to me, that's a disruptive behavior. So I ask them, I invite them, stay with the group, stay up, listen for things, stay curious. You might find something, one thing that would be interesting to you, and you might jump in. 90% of my career, I've been fairly lucky with that proposal. But I teach to the ones who want to learn. So I focus on their eyes, I focus on their energy, and that energy then it becomes contagious. So here's the example. So the school we went to, teachers and kids. Teachers are more apt to want to talk a little bit more, so we provided space for that. They weren't in a place of, we don't buy into this, because we did some things that we played about, we didn't talk about, we did some things and then said, this is experiential education. What was it like for you? What did you like it? Did you enjoy it? Cool. Now let's explore it. And then we played some more and we talked. And notice the kids, we never slow down. You can't slow down because then they go to a different place and space in their mind. So our question was, a good leader is, that was the only question I asked them. And then we would play, we'd collect data. We'd play, we'd collect data. I talked about science. We're doing experiments. So it's connecting them to school. So you, over the years, you figure out what works with different kinds of groups. And that's how you program. So it's not, none of us can teach you how to write a great program for tomorrow. It's got to be how you, the person who is learning how to be a facilitator, design programs. And it's going to take a while to get really good at it, in my opinion. I can't give you my plan and you can be good at working with a group.
So my next question, I don't think it's from there, but how much of how people respond, let's say the arrogant, the apathetic person,
Okay.
how much of how they respond has to do with you? So
Are you
I'm
talking
just gonna
about
take
verbal
some of the attention-
response or nonverbal response?
Both. I mean,
Both.
if you get verbal response, then that's engagement.
Yeah.
But it's like, they just find a corner, or they go silent, or they sulk, or whatever it is that they're doing that is expressing disagreement or apathy. And I'm just taking this to a different place, so not necessarily about Chris the man right now, but in the context of the principle.
Yeah.
And how much of the pushback, I'm just going to call it pushback at this point in time, that the disagreement and the apathy, how much of that has to do with the facilitator? Does it?
Well, I think you and I probably have the same answer, but I'm going to take a shot at it. I don't, at the moment, the facilitator is catalyzing things for the arrogant, and the arrogant is trying to find things to challenge the facilitator. So arrogance often comes from a level of power, right? And how they exercise their power. So things that come up for them are going to be catalyzed by a facilitator, and that's our goal, right? No matter what reactions we get, we create experiences to surface behaviors. Our job as facilitators, you look through all the writings, all the books that we read as experiential educators. Our job is to surface behaviors, right? Okay, so they have a little pushback on me as a facilitator. Yes, we are somewhat responsible because that's our job, to surface behaviors. Now, how you manage those behaviors is a 3-day workshop. Right? So always validate. Okay, I hear you. I get that. I see where you're coming from. At this moment in time, we can't address that, but I want you to hold on to that question because something else might come up for you that may make you see what you're thinking in a different point of view. Don't spend a lot of time, but I validate. The person who's quiet or who's got their arms crossed, right? I see your body language. I see you're quiet. Validate. 100%
Great. So
good choice.
That's a tool. Now you're offering a tool.
Yeah.
Right? What if, as a facilitator, I have been triggered by what I'm already calling apathy and...
So you're asking me a what if question of if
Yeah,
I'm
now
I'm
I'm
triggered?
saying, yeah. So
If I'm triggered as a
Yeah.
facilitator, you need to get some more training from Vishwas and talk about why you're being triggered as a facilitator, because our job as a facilitator is to surface behaviors. If you can't do that job and you get triggered, you're going to need to maybe choose another form
or
of
work on that rather than...
So then the trigger becomes your choice,
Right.
right?
Wow.
A great analogy. Oh, there's that other word that's escaping me. A great analogy that I use is
Simile,
about
metaphor, analogy. No, not
simile.
Okay.
So simile is
Similar.
a roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
So think of a roller coaster. Most people in the world know what a roller coaster is, right? And your job is to put your group on the roller coaster. And then you are in charge of the controls. You manage the controls, which is usually by questions. We do not want to get on the roller coaster with our participants. That's being triggered. That's going, in a sense, research native, right? So if that's something that's a challenge for you as a facilitator and other people surface a behavior in you, it's now flipped the script.
Wow. Hey,
they are now facilitating
I like
you.
the analogy. Yeah.
Right?
And now, because now you're in different roller coasters.
And you're no longer facilitating to make easy. I never really liked that, but that's the literal definition. But you're no longer out of that space of asking questions.
In the context of what you've just said, something that Claire said in a keynote really addressed that part in me, and I remember that sentence. And what she said is, and I'm going to bring it into the context of the apathy and the non-participation or whatever behaviors have surfaced. I think what she said is, what is it? Pay attention to this question. What is it that's making sense to them?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're not doing it because they've got a good reason. Let me put it this way. They've got a good reason to be who they are being. in that moment. And we just need to find that. And whether it makes sense or not is a different thing.
Whether it
But
makes sense to
something-
us,
Right.
because
What
it
is
makes sense to them.
Yeah, because it makes sense to them. And often I think we don't understand it. And that's why we then get onto our own roller coaster.
Mhm.
So if we could ask that one question to ourselves, that what is it, how can I find out what it is that made sense to them or makes sense to them while they're actually practicing that behavior?
Well, and you said it in your keynote as well.
I did.
What does it do to
What,
you?
yeah, and what do you do with it?
And that what do you do with it? And then our job is, as a facilitator, is to ask questions to bring out that it. What was it that it did? Right? And then you're exploring those behaviors attached to that it.
Yep.
So that's, to me, those things, how do you do this? How do you do that? It's practicing and figuring out what tools work for you the best, and always validating emotions and behaviors, and then redirecting it to, this is what we can do right now, but this is great, something great to think about over time. Cold cycle, exploring abstract conceptualizations. Those are the mental models we all carry. And if we can help them to explore those conceptualizations, or I think some models even say abstract generalizations. So depending on the model,
Hypotheses, generalizations.
these are mental models. So our job is to help people explore their mental models.
Right. We've been at it long enough.
We have any more questions? I mean, I'm just curious.
No,
Are there
they'll
any
just
more
go on.
questions?
I'll send them to you.
Oh, fantastic.
But they have access to you. They know how to get to you.
Cool.
Those of you who want to connect with Chris and make his life miserable, feel free. Go to fundoing.com. Have I got that right?
Perfect. That's a good place to start.
And I just want to let you know that he's got a whole lot of stuff that's free. He's at a stage in his life when he just wants to give everything away. So grab it as you go along. Thank you, Chris, for your time.
Thanks for the opportunity. It was fun. Ta-da! Wow.
Good,
My
huh?
first television experience.